Welcome everyone. Hi there. How is everyone? Oh, that was pretty weak. Good morning, everyone. All right, there we go. I'm Larry Platt from the Philadelphia Citizen, and welcome to our second, I believe, Business for Good series, Equity and Growth, Oxymoron No Longer. Before we get to our esteemed panel, I want to just do a couple of reminders. We'll be back here next week at the Square at Fittler, upstairs, this is really interesting and goes to the heart of the mission of the Citizen. It's a training session on deep canvassing to get out the vote in partnership with the nonprofit Changing the Conversation Together. Deep canvassing is the nonpartisan, door-to-door practice of conversation and empathy, which has been proven, going door to door for 15 minutes and having conversations with people, trying to get to the heart of why they don't vote and trying to get them engaged in voting. And it's been proven to be one of the premier ways to up the vote turnout levels. Our partners in this experiment in putting together an army of volunteers trying to get fellow citizens engaged are Young Involved Philly, Better Civics, and PA Youth Vote. It's a perfect distillation of the Citizens' mission, which is not just to send information out into the ether, but to defibrillate democracy in the American city where it was born. So go to our website, and if you want to come be part of this training session and then be part of this army of citizens that rescues America, we'd welcome you. On June 27th, we'll be back here for an evening with Pod Save America host and former Obama aide Dan Pfeiffer to talk about his new book, Battling the Big Lie, How Fox, Facebook, and the MAGA Media Are Destroying America. If you've ever listened to Pod Save America, you know this is one you don't want to miss. Finally, half of the Citizen staff, including me, was out with COVID a couple of weeks ago, so we had to postpone an evening or a morning with Ali Velshi, the smartest bald man on television. And he was going to be talking about reporting from the front lines of Ukraine, the fragile state of democracy, and the fragile state of media. So we've rescheduled that now for August 15th. So if you had gotten tickets to that, we'd welcome you to come and hear Ali and I kick the state of the world around. So like I said, this is our second Business for Good series, and last time we had a great conversation with Jerry Sweeney, Charmaine Matlock-Turner, and Jasmine Sessoms. Why are we doing this? Why when the C word, capitalism, is in such disrepute, are we suggesting that actually business needs to be a force for civic good? Well, because we think, and we've written a lot about this, that it's crony capitalism that's the problem, but that when you look at the facts, the International Monetary Fund says that 1 billion people worldwide were lifted out of poverty in the last year because of the free enterprise system. So our challenge is to be conscious about the role of business in civic life and to shape it to better ends. So, these guys, and Maria complains that when she reads me, she always feels that I'm berating her. Despite what some progressives might tell you, you can't have jobs without employers. And this right? And the city can't compete as we are currently the city with the 6th highest rate of income inequality. And Drexel's Bruce Katz, who has forgotten more about economic growth and cities than any of us will ever know, tells us all the time that cities are not run by governments, they're run by networks. And it's very purposeful that we have an example of a network here. We've got a business person, a public servant, and a labor leader, because that's how cities advance the ball, by cross-sector collaboration. So with all that, that gets us to our panel. Michael Foreman, FS Investments, co-founder of the Equity Alliance, Councilwoman María Quiñones-Sánchez, who has been a fighter for equity for how long? 8 years on council? Wait, on council?
Yes.
Oh my God, you're crazy. That's awesome. Why did I not realize that? And has done it, so that's 14 years fighting the establishment. And Ryan Boyer, who is a breath of fresh air in terms of labor's role in advancing the common good. So thank you three for being here. And I want to begin with you, Michael. You know, you've long heard my complaints that the business community here has outsourced civic leadership to a often sclerotic political class. And at some point, not too long ago, you're someone who could be off in the Hamptons every weekend, but at some point you decided to do something about that, and it started with asking people to join you on a 7 a.m. Saturday morning call. Explain. That's the roots of, I think, your activism now. Explain that and why.
Sure. First, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Larry, for hosting this. So I've been an engaged person in Philadelphia here for a while, and all of us who lived through COVID, and particularly right after the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020, recognized how fragile things were in our city. It was a point where the problems with the police force became certainly more tangible to people like me who didn't have the same experience as others. There were riots in the street. The city was in a very bad place. And a group of us got together that summer, including my co-founder and partner in that, Ryan Boyer, together with Madeline Bell from CHOP, Mike Gerber, who's a colleague of mine at FS, and John Fry. And we just started talking about how we could become more engaged. And we live in a city with really significant resources, but we've always punched below our weight in terms of job growth, in terms of equity, in terms of inclusion, in terms of optimism. And how we could try to engage a diverse group of people to address some of the issues that were facing the city. And over time, kind of each asked a friend, and we ended up with a group of about 60 people. We called it the Saturday Morning Group. We got together at 7:30 every Saturday morning. And it was a very diverse group, and you don't see that kind of diversity in Philadelphia in terms of both racial and gender diversity. We focused on 5 issues: gun violence, education, health equity, black and brown jobs, arts and culture, and really looked to make a change in each of those spaces. We've been doing it now for a couple years. I think we've made a positive impact. I think we've developed relationships of trust. And I think that's as important as anything else. Not too often in this city does a diverse group of leaders get together and discuss the issues we're confronting. And I'm particularly proud to be partners with Ryan. I think it's quite a story in Philadelphia that someone like me who runs a financial services business and someone like Ryan, who's now the head of the building trades, have partnered together, trust each other, and are trying to work for the common good of Philadelphia. I'd say it's still a work in process, and there's a lot of work to be done. But if you look at our city, and I'll just make 1 or 2 more comments and then pass it over to Ryan to fill in the blanks, we're a city where, despite great resources in this city, and despite great opportunities, we have a business class that hasn't always engaged in a positive way. We don't have the foundation support that other cities have, and we don't have an evolved political class, save for perhaps Maria and a few others. So it's time for folks to step up, and that's what Ryan and I are trying to do in a constructive way. Ryan, you want to add to that?
Yes, I too thank you, Larry, for hosting, and I am just honored to be on the panel with Maria Quiñones-Sánchez, who's one of the most thoughtful, engaged public servants that I've ever met. We don't always agree, but she's always prepared, and she's always doing what she thinks is right for the people. And of course, Michael. You say that the corporate, they outsourced it. I think they outsourced their conscience. What they do, the corporate community in Philadelphia by and large, they don't go to the schools in Philadelphia, they don't live in the neighborhoods in Philadelphia, so they drive by it. And this is how you get inequitable growth. And it's the reason why Michael and I are tied at the hip, because you're right. Not only he can be at the Hamptons, he can afford to live wherever he wants to live. He chooses to live in the city of Philadelphia, and he feels it, and he needs it. We have abandoned the model of corporate social responsibility. And we did it because we profit at all in. The stock price is going up, another tick. We have to understand that people matter, cities matter, and if we are going to really be the vanguards for capitalism, like you say, we have to show that not only can capitalism work to lift people out of poverty, but it can also give people hope. Right now, when you have hopelessness, when you feel you're stuck in a bad education system, horrible neighborhoods, and you're consigned to be at the bottom levels of the capitalistic system, why do I care about capitalism if I'm only going to be a cog in it? If we're talking about equitable growth, we have to talk about equity, and that's ownership. And Michael and I, when we first started these groups, there was some really harsh conversations that people from the Black and brown community had amongst ourselves, but we never had the opportunity to have it with people in the majority community that can actually do something about it. And we populated that group with a bunch of opinionated people who can articulate themselves probably differently than any other corporate CEO have ever heard in their lives. But it started an honest discussion about where are we and where we need to go. We cannot gloss over that we're in a bad position, because if you don't measure it, it won't grow. So we need the metrics. That's why we need the smart guys. I see Levy there, and you talked about Katz earlier. We need those people. But if we don't have the collective wherewithal to do equitable growth, and that's going to take changing things. We cannot do things like we've been doing them. That's why Michael, and we get along also because he's an early morning guy and I'm an early morning guy. Call me at 10 o'clock at night, I may be asleep, but if you call me at 4 o'clock in the morning, chances are I'll be up. So I again, Michael, thank you for your leadership on the Saturday Morning Group and the Equity Alliance to start discussions like this, because how we improve them is we talk about them, and through talking about them, we have great ideas, and we push those ideas into action, and that's how we improve.
I want to get to the substance of those ideas in a minute, but I was remiss in not thanking our venue host, the Fittler Club, which is, if you haven't experienced this place, you need to, and you can take a tour afterwards here. It is, again, the brainchild of Michael Foreman, co-founder, and it is also, not coincidentally, I'm blown away every time I'm here, and Ryan and I have hung out in the bar. It is the most diverse, often the most diverse room in Philadelphia, in my experience. So kudos to
I have to say something about the Fittler Club. I've been asked to join the other club, I won't say his name, and I have one policy. If my grandfather wouldn't have got admitted, I don't join. This club was built, and in its inception, it was meant to be diverse. So it was here for us, and that's why I joined the Fittler. I would not join those other clubs that remain named. That make you put on a jacket. I don't like that either.
Yeah. I'm with you, man. Maria, a couple things. One is, 14 years of standing up to the establishment, never having the endorsement of the machine, standing up to special interests, and yet you're still in the fight. Talk to us a bit about, and your district is, at last I saw, 41% poverty rate. And I think those of us in the media need to always define what that means. That means an annual income of $21,000 for a family of 4. People don't realize what we're talking about here. So when we talk about equitable growth, what does that mean to you, given the state of your constituency?
So thank you also. It's a pleasure to be here both with Mike and Ryan. You know, one of the things that when I ran for office, in particular this district that was plagued with corruption, voter fraud, all of those things, I knew that I had to come in being the biggest cheerleader and looking at the assets that the district had, right? So when we talk about 41% poverty, you know, for me, those data sets are resilient people. During COVID, we saw them as essential workers, right? They were the ones that kept schools open. They were the ones that kept, you know, the stores open. And folks all working hard to provide for a better outcome for their children and for their families. So I came to council with an agenda that I couldn't come and just ask for more resources. I needed to add resources to the table, and I needed to make sure that the resources, when people were making investments in districts like mine, that people understood that the city is better when the 7th is better. The city is better when we're taking care of our most vulnerable. And, you know, pre-pandemic, we started doing a lot of work in the poverty space. Council came up with narrowing the gap. We knew there were all these inequities. COVID taught us that people die when there's inequities, but it also forced us, right, to do things we wouldn't have done before. I'm chair of education, I'm chair of appropriations. If you'd have said to me, we were gonna do a one-to-one technology with young people in the school district of Philadelphia pre-COVID, I would have said no. COVID forced us there, right? And it forced us to create Philly Connect. And Comcast stood up to the plate, and we were able to get technology. So one of the things that I've learned is when there's political will, when there's accountability tables, one of the things that council has worked really strongly with, and we've been doing around poverty, we have the ability, and pre-COVID, we were talking about this with the Poverty Fund and the work we're doing with United Way, there's 100,000 people in that threshold that we could have moved up, right? Some of it is benefits access. Philadelphia leaves $400 million on the table for benefits that people don't access. Some of it is upskilling people. Some of it is just improving the quality of jobs that Paul Levy always articulates. So I look at all of this as full of opportunities. What I like about the discussion now around equity is I don't have to be apologetic about it. We're a segregated city. We know what the data sets are. So we're going to own them, but what are we going to do about them? And so now I get to be in a space where I can say to folks, investments downtown are hugely important. Our downtown is vital, but investment in people in neighborhoods is also an investment, right? That's not an expense. And how we view, right? Every time we're going to make strategic investments in neighborhoods and people, it's sort of like, and look, we're going through the budget process now. Can we really afford that? And now we can have a discussion of we can't afford not to do that. And how do you move to investment in people and move people in that poverty space? And when people live with fixed incomes, how do they do it in a dignified way? And housing and all of those things become an important part of that.
You used a couple of key words there. One was opportunity. I get nervous when we talk about lifting people out of poverty because going back to the numbers I suggested, if you're lifting that family to $25,000 a year instead of $21,000, they're out of poverty, but you haven't provided a pathway to the middle class. So if you, and this is open to all three of you, talk about strategies to provide a pathway to the middle class as opposed to just making the poverty numbers look a little bit better?
I think the best pathway to a middle class is to join the union. That has been proven out by the numbers, you know that. But it's also the unions opening its doors to the most vulnerable who haven't traditionally understood the process, is demystifying the process, is making an agreement with the Philadelphia School District that every CTE program will now be a registered pre-apprenticeship program with the Philadelphia Building Trades. We did that last week. It's about those type of partnerships, but it's also about reimagining the 21st century school. Everything else has changed. If you look at your television set, if you look at your telephone, it looks radically different than it did just when I was a kid in the 70s, except for the classroom in the school. We must make major investments in education. And right now, we have to understand that public education may look different. They may be run by a conglomerate of charter schools, they may be run by district schools, but we must have accountability that we have top-notch schools, whether they're district-run, charter-run, or we have a parochial and private school network. If we don't give our children a real good education, every job now requires some sort of upscaling, even construction work. The first construction job I was on, I was 17 years old, I was going to college. It was 30th Street Station. We were demolishing the offices. It was 47 guys to do that job. Right now, they just did that same exact job again. 7 guys on the Black and Brock machines, all members of my laborers union, but they had to have calibration to understand how to use those Brock machines that robots do demolition now. I mean, we still do some spot them, but 80% of buildings are now torn down by machines, not by people. Education is the foundation of everything, and we cannot run away from it, and we cannot hide, and we cannot put our children in sick schools and expect them to perform. So we have to understand the capital budget on the school district, and we must educate the educational program, and we're addressing that at the Equity Alliance as well.
Michael, education is obviously critical, and Ryan's exactly right. But that's a long-term game, right? What in your mind, if you had a magic wand, could we do to accelerate the entry to the middle class?
Right, so, I worry about the here and now, and I think education is the #1 priority and the #1 long-term goal, and it's a very complicated issue. And these two folks probably know a lot more about it than I do. I worry about the vitality of the city, and I worry about violence, I worry about services, I worry about the leadership that we've had recently. We've all talked about this. There's a budget that's about to be passed. I'm hoping council does something transformative. I think we need to send a message to the business community, to the region, that we're open for business, that we want to attract jobs, because unless we have a tax base, unless we're providing jobs, we're not going to solve the poverty and education issues. If we end up being, people say, I fear we're going to be Detroit. Like, I fear we're going to be Canton, Ohio. I fear that there's just going to be poor people living in Philadelphia because you've got this really bad tax rate, you've got bad services, you've got violence, and folks decide, like me, we don't want to live in this city anymore. And a lot of folks are making that decision. So I think it's a time where council, and I've talked to a council person about this, can really send a message that Philadelphia is open for business and generate a sense of optimism. So that's the first thing I'd say, and I think that's an immediate issue. The second thing is we live in a city where more than 25% of the people live below the poverty line. Like, that is just intolerable. And where 50% of the folks in Philadelphia are people of color, but fewer than 5% of the businesses are owned by Black and brown business people. That is also an issue. So I think it's really important that we figure out ways to facilitate the flow of capital to Black and brown businesses and make it easier to do business in Philadelphia. The BERT tax affects small businesses more than it affects large businesses. The wage tax affects small businesses more than it does large businesses. It affects folks that live in Philadelphia. So there's an opportunity to make it easier to do business in Philadelphia, make business more friendly, and then I think it's up to the leaders to really think about how we do business differently, how we think about supplier diversity, how we think about Black and brown jobs, how we think about Black and brown jobs in the C-suite, how we grow Black and brown businesses.
I love that, and I'm a big fan of a couple things that are in the works right now. Della Clark's fund, which is an equity fund, which hopefully will be about $50 million, the first round. The other thing is this GRIT fund that the Chamber was instrumental in starting. 30 banks have stepped up to fund local CDFIs. So I'm seeing some of that, but I'm not seeing an overall strategy from the city in terms of flooding. Like, we need a Marshall Plan for capital to Black and brown businesses. Maria, you and I had drinks, and you drank me under the table in your district, and she did.
I didn't get elected without not going to a lot of neighborhood pubs.
But it was very impressive. But what I remember is you taking me on a virtual tour of the district and showing me that there is no dearth of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. There's a dearth of capital and connections. Speak about that, and then also, if you could, address the tax reform issue.
Yeah, I mean, and I know a lot of the Pew folks are here, and their research study really speaks to this. I've been doing business tax reform since I got elected, and when I first started the conversation, folks said, why is the Latina from North Philadelphia talking tax reform? And it was because the Latina in North Philadelphia knows all those small businesses, how much they struggle, right, those family-owned businesses. And when I was running for office, I visited a lot of these businesses, the manufacturers, and they said, we hate you, we hate the city. And when I got elected, I went back and I said, okay, what do we do about this? And really dug deep around what taxes companies pay. And at that particular time, we still had, and we still have, and we're gonna grow a manufacturing sector that's vitally important to the city of Philadelphia because of the types of jobs that it creates. And I went back and we did business tax reform and changed the trajectory of how we thought about businesses, right? There was this concentration on gross receipts when the net income was the one that was desperately hurting small businesses' ability, because they hide from it. If you hide from it, you can't capitalize yourself, and then you can't expand. So, we're one of 4 jurisdictions that has a net profits tax. Washington, D.C., the political capital of the world, New York City, the financial capital of the world, and Detroit. And, those are companies we don't want to be in, right? And so I think that the work we did, and we demonstrated and we proved it when we did the $100,000 exemption, and as was reported last year, 73,000 small businesses don't have a tax liability to the city because of that reform work that we did. Could we have done more? Absolutely. And part of what you see now in the conversations with the chamber and the ethnic chambers, they've all said BERT is a challenge. And I think we need to recognize that and say, if we want small businesses to grow, we want them to stop hiding their net profits. We want them to be as profitable as they want to be, and we want them to expand and be able to capitalize themselves. Because we talk about Black and brown businesses don't have access to capital because Black and brown businesses can't make it through year 3. We have a tax system where your first year, you're paying your first year and a projection of your second year. We set up small businesses to fail. So all of these businesses, and now there's a growth of social impact businesses. I did, B Corp legislation also to incentivize people, impact businesses. So this notion of what does this small business community look like and how can it grow? It cannot happen if we structurally do not change that. And all the impact funds in the world are not going to be helpful if ultimately we don't change the bottom line of these businesses. And we've proven that. So we already know what works, and we have to be aggressive about it. It's very hard in the middle of, a budget negotiations where you had the property assessments. We're juggling all of these things. I think we can do all of those things. I think we're going to be, and council has demonstrated this in the past, I think we're going to be in a good place around property tax assessments, around how do we protect people, and I think we're going to be able to do some of the business tax cuts and invest in people. Because we are at an intersection right now where the administration has federal money, we have the property tax assessments that now give us predictability moving into the future. What we need over the next 48 hours is the political will to say, we're going to do things a little bit different, right? We're going to take care and make investments in people. This crime situation, in terms of people wanting to stay in the city, is a huge one, right? People need to feel safe. Businesses, whether you're downtown or you're in the neighborhoods, what I would say to you, and I think what, pleases me around the alliance and others, what we need to do is create the political will space for people to do things differently. And that's what we've been lacking, this leadership of saying, we don't have a Marshall Plan because I think we still don't have a vision about what 2030 looks like. We're still dealing in 2022, we're still trying to deal with recovery, and we need to say, what is this city gonna look like in 2030? What does education look like in 2030? And I agree with Ryan. I think it's about 21st century learning schools, but we have to say to people, you're gonna get a good K-8 school in every neighborhood, whether it's a public school or a public charter, and you're entitled to that. What does that look like? And we need to fund it in a way that folks don't think of every time we talk about reorganizing the school district, it's about closing failing schools, right? Or failing buildings, but we're talking about, no, we're building new buildings, we're modernizing buildings, and we're creating school sizes that better reflect, this is a planning issue, reflect neighborhoods. Neighborhoods have changed. We don't need to send 200 kids to a building built for 1,000 folks, and we need to have honest dialogues with our residents about that. So this is a political will issue right now. This is in the 14 years I've been here and the 6 years that I've been chair of appropriations, never had we had the resources to make the right choices as we do now.
I want to piggyback off what Michael said. We need optimism, and we need the political will. The question isn't can we do it, is why aren't we doing it? We need to understand that if we don't have a safe, clean city, none of this matters, right? And we need to understand that if we don't do something to our tax system, all the capital that Della had, they're going to move on the other side of City Avenue. That happens too. We know that we need to give our workers a raise. We have record inflation. Gas prices going up, bread is going up. Yet we take a little over 3% of everyone's paycheck in the form of wage taxes. We need to be aggressive with that. We have American Rescue Act money. We need to go and have the political will to say, it's raining now. We can't wait 5 years from now. Yes, we want to have a vision. I talk every day about vision. Don't think about now, make your decisions 10-year decisions. But sometimes we have to fix it right now. In the here and now, we have budget discussions. A budget is the state of priorities. What you prioritize is what you pay for. So either we're going to prioritize people and jobs, or we're not. And that is, every decision based on political will be based on that for me. How do you prioritize people? If you want to help people, you give them a raise. We know that inflation is record high now. So we can take some of that burden off by giving them money every week or every paycheck. And we can send a signal that we want jobs, that Philadelphia is open for business by doing something with the Burt tax. We know it hurts small businesses. We can't say that we want to restore commercial corridors, but still have the same antiquated systems that killed the commercial corridors in the first place. That is lunacy. And so when you talk about political will, We will build the political will. We just need politicians to have the will to do what's right for the people and can withstand a little article or Facebook post by people that's saying, well, we don't have this or that program. I think every social program is only successful when it works itself out of a job. Because if that social program is good enough to help the people pull themselves out, then in 7 to 8 years, we won't need that social program.
Did you want to answer?
Yeah, so, first of all, I think we're really lucky to have these two people in Philadelphia as I've become more involved. These are really two of the stars in Philadelphia. And, that's a reason for optimism. You're all here, and I'd ask you guys what you all are doing to help us make change. Who's holding the DA accountable for not enforcing the laws? If we don't get our arms around the safety issue, there's no way that the city is going to recover. And what I fear, and what I hear when I talk to leaders in other cities, is that we're falling behind. They enforce the gun laws in New York. They do not have the kind of gun violence we have here in Philadelphia. They recalled the DA in San Francisco. San Francisco is a fairly progressive place. They do not have violence issues in cities like Oakland, which is far more progressive than Philadelphia, because they have DAs and they enforce the law, and they have better policies with respect to their police force than we have here. So we all need to hold our elected officials accountable, or there's not going to be a very bright future for Philadelphia. And that's really what drives me. You have this city, you have great resources. One need only look west of here and see all that's going on in the life sciences space. One need only look to my left and see a city which has not had a great history of diversity in its trade unions, and now we have a person of color leading the trade union. That is an incredible story and an incredible move forward. So what are we all going to do as engaged citizens of Philadelphia to help make positive change? And I think that's what the citizens doing, and that's what we all ought to be thinking about.
I'm going to mosey out into the audience because there are people here who are far smarter than me, including this gentleman. Paul Levy, you must have a lot to say.
So Michael, Larry emailed me last night and said, can you have a question prepared? And you've actually answered my question, but I'm going to answer it anyway because it's the only one I prepared. But seriously, first of all, thank you all for doing this and for the collaboration and the conversation going on between you. But my question really goes to, so much of the time in Philadelphia, we talk past each other. You're talking to somebody who doesn't understand your perspective, you don't fully understand their perspective. And obviously the Equity Alliance has been about trying to overcome that. Right now in council, there's going to be a choice between increasing homestead exemption, lowering wage and business taxes, and funding services. And all of us would like to think we would do all three. But each of you have reached beyond the camps you're in, but just for a moment, for each of you, when you're sitting across the table from someone who's not in your camp, what is the one thing you wish they understood or knew that you don't think they do? And in your own camp, what is the one thing that you don't think your own people understand in terms of the ability to reach beyond? So Michael, what's the thing that you don't think you're hearing back on the elected side, and then among other business people, and Maria the same, and Ryan?
Sure. I'm going to defer to Maria first. I mean, she's living this in real time right now at council. We're in a budget session. There's going to be a budget, I suspect, this week. Maria has heard from me and Ryan, as have the other members of council. We deeply believe that it's time for Philadelphia to send a message of optimism and hope. Time to lower the wage tax, time to lower the BERT tax, time to do the right kind of homestead exemption, and that will be the beginning of sending a positive message. Then I think it's our job, it's my job, it's Ryan's job, it's the business leader's job. We really do need to deal with equity in this city. We do need to grow black and brown jobs. We do need to grow black and brown businesses. But we have not had a positive, constructive message in this city. How many years? It's been a number of years where we said something good. What do we hear? We hear about the murders on South Street. We hear about gun violence. So I'm hopeful that this time council will send that message. That's what I'd like to see.
For me, is understanding that we have no one managing the city budget, right? And I say this as chair of appropriations. And so for my colleagues, it's always like, we need more resources when we need to change what we're funding and how we're doing the things that we're doing. We need to move away from programs and go to investments of people. So we would say, for instance, you know, Ryan talked a little bit around the streets department. The streets department is one of the most underfunded departments that we have, where we pay workers a starting salary of $38,000, right, for people who are 96% Black, will lose their taste and their smell ability in 2 years, and then we wonder why we don't have a good system in our streets department. We need to invest in that, right, in a way that's very different. New York pays twice as much, works in the evening. They manage that department. We need to look at the water department. Environmental justice is real, right? We don't have a tree canopy in the city of Philadelphia, but we have a water authority with billions of dollars figuring out how to manage storm water management. We need to put trees up. You know, so when we're you know, part of the work and my frustration is throwing money after bad policy is not going to get us a better government. And so what frustrates me the most in my role, and I'm an executive by training, I learned to legislate, and what I've learned in my role as appropriations, we gotta manage these departments. We gotta use technology. In public safety, the issue of forensics and resolving these cases, there's so many things that are not being managed. And we have departments that are working at cross purposes. We should be using these departments, this infrastructure investment, to create jobs, to create opportunity. And lastly, I'll say, because I think the education piece is key, and education is around here and now. It is cheaper for us to send high school juniors and seniors to community college than to have them in failing high schools. I will repeat that. It is cheaper for us to put thousands of young kids in 11th and 12th grade at community college than to keep in underperforming high schools. This is, again, a will issue about let's structurally do things differently. And then we'll get a different return. But if we keep just throwing the money in the same pots with no plan, no vision, and no investment in people, we're gonna get a dissatisfied electorate, residents, because government can't serve them appropriately.
You know, Paul's question went to the issue of trust beyond your camp, and it reminded me of the first time Michael and Ryan started having these conversations. My understanding, if I remember correctly from you guys, Michael brought up taxes, and you were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So explain how you both have evolved, because I think that's a metaphor for how the city can move forward.
Oh, I believe, from my perspective, business guy want taxes, lower taxes, and we've seen how that worked nationally. If you don't target tax cuts with a laser focus on the outcome you want, you'll just make the rich richer and the poor poorer, quite frankly. And that's what I thought he was talking about. He's an asset manager. I'm like, they all have the same mindset, but it wasn't about that. Because I believe in tax cut. When Mayor Kenny was Councilperson Kenny, we lobbied his office to start the 10-year tax abatement. That emanated out of the Philadelphia building trades because we thought that it would bond a construction industry, which it did. So targeted tax cuts work. And we couldn't have trust. You talked about camps. The accountability was him showing up every day, understanding his perspective of what the business community needs to operate here. Because if we don't understand that, you know, we build buildings and we like to build big buildings. The bigger the better, the more expensive the better, right? That's what we do that's what I do for a living. And I need to understand what environment does the business community need to build a building? Once we have the environment, we have the project, we have the money, then I can tell them, well, we have a collective group of entrepreneurs over here called the Collective. I see you back there, Sandra Glenn. We have a collective group, and then we can start putting pieces together to be intentional about equity. But we need the environment, we need the money, and we need the tax structure to get to equity. And that's what I try to get her colleagues on council to understand, that it's not just tax the rich, tax the rich. The rich can go. You tax things that can't move, theoretically. But the rich can go, and you don't want the rich to go, because all those people that we're going to raise the homestead exemption on, then most of their houses will have to be taxed, won't have a tax, and you won't have any streets department. And we do have to right-size government, not shrink government, but understand what services are more valuable, because if we don't have a safe, clean city, free of, and that's clean of potholes, and the streets department has been starving, and their starting salary is paltry. You're talking about $38,000, that's less than $28 an hour. I do this in my mind because it's what I do. Now, if you go to Walmart or Target, they're all paying $18, $19. So I'm gonna go behind a trash truck for for the same salaries, I could just greet someone? I think not. We have to understand that in a marketplace, you have to compete for talent, and that's what we need to do. But the trust building in camps, I don't envy her. I have to take meetings with people in different camps, because especially now the mayor's up, so we have a lot of that politics, so that creates other camps. So it's like, well, let me meet with the progressive wing, let me meet with because I don't think we need a Philadelphia wing. We need a wing that are going to have policies that are for Philadelphia. What works in San Francisco and San Diego don't work in Philadelphia. We need to put Philadelphia first, and if we put Philadelphia first, we will do the things that we need to do. And that's the message that Michael and I are trying to send, that accountability is coming, at least from the group that we have. If you don't put Philadelphia first, we won't put you first, because it's not your seat, it's the people's seat, and you can get removed from office.
Any other questions? Let's, oh, wow, we got a lot of, let's go to Dave Hardy, sorry.
Hi, thank you for being here this morning. We have a school system that everybody says needs more money, okay? But the money that people are talking about are giving it to the school system. And the school system basically has failed this city in black and brown neighborhoods. And so if we just advocate for more money and throw it in the same place, we're not going anywhere. What are we going to do to be able to open up that conversation? Because we know that there are other options that are working for our children that can be funded and that should be funded, but we can't even have that conversation because it's politically toxic for the people in office. How can we get that conversation to be more honest and be more directed and targeted to the people who need better education?
Quite frankly, you have 60,000 students in the charter school system. 80. Those parents need to make their voices known. I was a parent of a charter school student and he went to Boys Latin, graduated from Boys Latin, had a full scholarship to Malvern Prep. That wasn't the fit for him. At the time, I was living in my neighborhood, and Catchment School was West Philadelphia High. Not even an option. It was not even, I would have been locked up I just would be a bad parent. People send people to those neighborhood schools as a last option. So how do we have the conversation? You get that parent network to go and advocate and agitate and go to city council. And once we get off the mic, I'll tell you the amazing thing that 75 people could do in city council when they actually open the building up. Nothing gets done in there if you get with 75 people until we get this issue. I know we've done it. We might have had bullhorns, whistles, and baby, but it was only 75 people. But in that small chamber, it looks like a lot. So advocacy, you only get to do education one time. You don't get a do-over. You get 12 years, and if you get it wrong, you can sign them to a life of horrible consequences. We got to realize that from K to 3, you learn to read, and from 3 to the rest of your life, you read to learn. So we have to understand that a good school in every neighborhood, regardless of where they run it, is there. and you're going to have vested interests. You always have that, Mr. Hardy, but you got to be willing to fight those. Imagine me. I'm a union leader, been part of a union my whole life, and I had this conversation with my friends at the PFT. I said, you've lost. Your product is no longer sellable. In the building trades in the 80s, we had a problem with crack cocaine, quite frankly. We wasn't selling skilled labor. We were going out of business. We started the Allied Trades Assistance Program where we helped people get off drugs, and we had a firm drug testing policy. We did that to our own workers because we realized that what we were selling to our customer was skilled labor. If they're selling education to their customer and their customer is saying, we don't want your education, we want their education, you need to change, not pour more money on that gasoline fire.
Let's get a quick question over here. And we only have about 10 minutes left, so make the questions quick and the responses brief, and we can get as many people in as we can. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm John Moore. I'm with Impact PHL. There's a movement around business for good and impact investing in the country. Not a lot of people know that movement around business for good started here in Philadelphia through B Lab and some of the early certified B Corps that were certified here in Philadelphia. And for a while, we were a leader in that space, and we've kind of drifted away from that. We're trying to envision Philadelphia, again, being a leader in that business for good space. And so my question is, how can we, in our business community, in our city government, how can we strategically work towards recruiting those types of companies and creating those types of companies, building out that economic system?
The city has to support it. In fact, the B Corp legislation that I passed sunsets. We have to work on that. So we should be talking about that, the B Corp tax credit that we currently have. I think it's about the commerce and the city embracing what impact businesses really mean, like the B Corp businesses really mean. It really is a leader in bringing diversity and bringing women and understanding their employees. It's all the things that we talk about in equity, right? The principles of equity are built into impact businesses. The city has to embrace that and support that. Even when we did the tax credit, it was up to 50 businesses, right? So from the beginning, it was sort of like, we're going to support impact businesses, but only up to this point. And that has to be part of our business development strategy. So I totally support it, and I'm very concerned that it hasn't been prioritized in the system.
Well, not only has it been prioritized, there's an opportunity here for a marketing campaign, right? This, as John said, this is the birthplace of B Corps.
It should be the B Corp capital of the world because we're the founding capital of B Corp.
We're the first startup.
Yep.
That's right.
Agreed.
Let's go right here.
Hey, Sophie Bryan from Pew. Councilor Day, I want to go back to your point about sort of the operations of city government. So there's clearly an ask on the table that the city make more feasible for business the tax and regulatory environment, and you've pointed to some specific examples about how city government isn't working effectively. Can you just take us through your vision of how it would be working effectively and what the business community could help contribute towards that?
So, I mean, I think part of it is that we have many departments that work at cross purposes. It's 157 steps in the city published this, 157 steps to open a restaurant in the city of Philadelphia. 157 steps. Do we really need all that? So I think we have to create that war room space where we say, and we empower the Department of Commerce, right? It's like, how do you navigate the health department, licenses and inspection, all of the key things that we want, but in a way that it is not financially burdensome for a startup business to establish. And we did this a couple of years ago. Pre-COVID, we did a regulatory committee, Councilmember Green and others, and we were able to eliminate licenses that existed that shouldn't have existed. But it is a mindset about what happens, and I'll say the Center City, the Concourse building, right? People need to walk in there and feel like they are welcomed. I mean, we hear stories and after stories of, I'm starting a business, I got to go to revenue for one thing, I got to go to this place for another. Like, we we need to one-stop shop that. You need to walk into one place where you're going to be able to go through this process and set up your business. What better way to feel like we're open for business, right, Michael, than going into the city and in a couple of hours walking out with all the stuff that you need to get your business started. And so you can't have L&I in one cross purpose, which is like, you know, it's a permitting thing, it's about collecting a fee, or the health department, it's about a fee and collecting. It really is, how do we help businesses comply? This is a compliance issue. One of the things that I proved when I brought income-based tax payment plans to the city of Philadelphia, whether it's UPA or TAP, if you give people a way to comply, you have your collection rate goes up. And it was hard to, you know, we were putting people in payment plans they couldn't pay, and then they didn't comply, and then we said we have a debt situation in the water department. We forced them to stop financing their bond A ratings on 30-year debt of water on people that they weren't going to collect. That's how we did business, because the water department could. So it could literally capitalize bad debt for poor people in their bond deal. So we moved away from that. After 15 years, that stuff gets wiped out. But when we create a TAP, we showed them the collection rates can go up. So this is a compliance issue. Businesses want to comply. They want predictability, they want transparency, and they want it to be done quickly. And departments should not be working at cross purposes as it relates to the business sector. And so it's creating that war room, creating that commerce department that has the authority to navigate those spaces and help small businesses.
Let's do one last question here and then get you guys out of here. Mr. Liepart.
Hey, good to see all of you. I salute, of course, my good friend Ryan Boyer, Councilman Sanchez, and Michael Foreman, esteemed group here. What I wanted to ask is, what can we do today to help young people? And I'm going to share, what I heard the other night that came from Governor Ed Rendell, and he put out a challenge to a room, a majority white people in the room, highly affluent at the Museum of the American Revolution, and we all know Ed is struggling kind of physically, but his mind is there. And his challenge to the room was, years ago, there were summer jobs for young people, right? There were summer jobs for young people, and I know I benefited immensely from the summer jobs I had on the Philadelphia Jobs Program and all the above. And we, as a business community, we struggle now to open up the doors. And as he put it, he said that those summer jobs, the $12 an hour, whatever you're going to pay those kids, it's not going to hurt the businesses at all, but it's going to change the lives of young people immensely. And unfortunately, over the last couple of years, I'll say the post Jeremy Nowak era and people like Jerry Linfest, and that's why I always salute, Michael Foreman for stepping up the way he stepped up. Jerry Nowak said to me one time, when in my first marriage, when I had a young person, a young child, he said to me, people who can leave have to stay, right? So people who have the choice to leave have to stay. So how do we provide hope and opportunity to young people today, like in real time? Because if not, right, they will continue to commit crimes and do things because they feel lost. And to hear Ed Rendell, mid-70s, older at this point, to say, like, these people, and he didn't say these people, he said, young people feel like they don't have an opportunity, that there is nothing out there, so why wouldn't you do this, right? Literally personal, why wouldn't you do it if you feel like, 3 years from now, I might not be here? So we have to do something today.
Let me start, and then I'm interested to hear what others say. I think we as business leaders have a really significant responsibility here. We just started a pilot internship program with Reverend Waller, where we're going to have 12 of his folks, I think 12, high school kids at FS 4 days a week for the summer, paying them $15, $18 an hour, and giving them the opportunity to see kind of how the business community works. The hope is that we can roll that pilot out across Philadelphia. So I really think it's the obligation of the business leaders to do stuff like that. I think the internship programs are a great start. I think we need to support the community college. I think that's a really great way for kids in the community to make that transition, and we've been supportive in the community college. So there's lots of vehicles out there that we can use. And again, I just think it's a matter of engagement. what tends to happen is everybody just looks around for others to solve the problem. And if we all kind of step up, we can help solve that problem and make some positive impact. Right?
I know that Charmaine Matlock Turner gets on me every year. UAC has a summer job, and we fund it to the max. We take 2 children in every department that we have at the laborers. It helped me. I come from a poor family. That was my spending money for the summer. I was fill a job, the old fill a job. And we have to just fund it. We can't, and companies that can give an enhancement like FS, do it. Because those people that go through, you change their lives. And it is a real job experience. It gives them a sense of seeing people. Because if we want to be honest about this violence, it is about hopelessness. So them seeing someone that is really affluent working for it, their only ideals come off of, the people that they idolize come off of Instagram or the neighborhood drug dealer. So now I see Michael rolling up in there. I see Dr. Leapart coming in. I see Ock coming in. Those are powerful, and it changes your mind because it tells you could do it a different way. So it's not just a paycheck, it's also the example of people doing it the right way. And we cannot underestimate when you've been in a community that has been disinvested for a long time, that the only person that I used to see was the insurance guy. Now they don't even come around anymore. That's just the truth.
No, I am a beneficiary of a summer employment program through Mastbaum, my school, and in my 11th grade year, I was at Cigna, coming downtown, and it changed how I looked, right, at the city, right? Because it was like I was coming downtown by myself, going to Cigna corporate offices and saying, wow, I could do all this stuff. So I agree with you, and I'm glad that Governor Rendell is still advocating for it. We have 9,000 positions every year, as Ryan mentioned. Charmaine Matlock, PYN, the network, they really struggle to raise the amount of money. I think we went from 7 to 9 over the last couple of years. Anybody that's interested in funding those opportunities, there's a debate right now because they have asked for an increase in increasing the salaries, and that's one of the issues in the budget right now. It's like, do we give them enough money to pay more to the young people, right, than the bare minimum wage? But the fact that we even have to debate it, for me, is always frustrating.
First, Keith, thanks for getting me choked up by bringing up Jeremy Nowak, the founding chairman of the Citizen, my mentor. He would not, a lot of people wear those WWJD bracelets, what would Jesus do? Mine is, what would Jeremy do? And he would not be patient in this moment. And I do think his ethos hovers over this discussion. And I think he'd be really proud of these 3 panelists. And I think he'd say, as I was thinking, as I was listening to them, why don't we just turn the government over to these 3? So I want to thank you all 3 from the bottom of my heart for this and for your service. Thank you all.
Thank you all.